Good morning, everyone, and welcome to listen in on the topic of the crucial role of cybersecurity posture management in your next-gen IT strategies. I see that there's still people popping in, but maybe we still go for it promptly in accordance with the timeline and start off by introducing myself. So my name is Mickos, and I'm the director for managed services here at Nixu, a DNV company now these days. So as you probably have heard, Nixu has been acquired by DNV, and thus we are now part of the bigger DNV family. But we still operate with the Nixu brand for a while. So just to clarify things. I have spent in my whole adult life, you could say, in the IT industry, so more than 30 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity in different positions, and more than 20 years of that in different kinds of leadership positions, mainly then here at Nixu, and prior to that at CGI and Tieto Enator, as it was called at the days back in the 90s, and so forth. My major achievements have been building cybersecurity businesses, really, and both here at Nixu and also prior to that. But with that said, then maybe we move ahead into the actual agenda. So I'll start off with from the, I would say, very basics in a way, that talk a bit about digital transformation. No big news there, I hope. so I presume that more or less all of you have been and are doing digital transformation. And of course, the reasoning behind that, at least for the major part, is to drive productivity in your respective businesses, whatever industry you are working in. Having said that, from a cybersecurity perspective, it's also constantly kind of adding new services, adding new elements, adding more digital elements, and of course adding more reliance on the digital realm to the business as well, dependency, and that of course then also increases complexity of the overall architecture and solution, and thus the landscape that we're trying to protect from a cybersecurity perspective. That has also led to an ever increasing cyber expenditure, and that of course is, let's say, at least not for everyone, a sustainable path to continue just growing the cyber spend. So more and more I hear CISOs getting challenged for their cyber spend, and whether it's in line and creating enough value in order to be justified from the business perspective. Of course, also when a big change that has happened as a result of the digital transformation is also the fact that in many organizations, IT is not more merely kind of owned and driven and developed by the IT organization, but more and more we're seeing business IT type of functions. So in practice, the lines of businesses are actually developing their own ITs as we speak, and that of course also adds an element of complexity from being in control of the cybersecurity posture in the bigger IT enterprise IT architecture point of view as well. And this all increases constantly the attack surface, so kind of the potential elements that an attacker could go out to attack against, the number of those is constantly increasing because you have new services, more digital footprint, and thus more attack surface. And all of this then of course is adding to an ever increasing risk level. And then of course the big question is that, well, how can we then manage efficiently this risk without the cyber expenditure going through the roof? And this is more or less the kind of setting the scene for this webinar, that I'll try to share some thoughts about my own reflections on this problem. So where are we going, and what do we think that one should do to try to balance out this optimization problem, if you like. So going forward, then of course, on top of this, we all see also that there's a lot of regulation regarding cybersecurity popping up, be it Nixu or any other regulation that is behind the corner or just about to be launched or in the planning stages. There are plenty, and that of course adds a lot of compliance requirements to the soup as well, which again add complexity in a way, and but also add to the spend again. So then of course the compliance management becomes a big part of this managing the overall expenditure and overall risk as well. The vulnerabilities in the world are by no means diminishing, but quite the contrary. There's lots and lots popping up, new ones every day. And of course, it's natural because, again, it basically goes back to the previous slide that the more you have software running there, the more you will have vulnerabilities, because every software is vulnerable one way or the other. The only difference really is that do we know about it already or not. And then of course, the final point on this slide is the legacy world. So in many cases, if you are as a company born in the cloud and in one cloud only and have a very monolithic IT architecture and everything is modern and integrated and nice, and you have one ecosystem also for your security technology to rule it all, then you're in a good position because it's less complex to defend. But of course, the harsh reality for most of our organizations is that there is legacy, and of course all the new services that you build and develop today are legacy of tomorrow as well, and thus there will always be legacy to maintain as well. And that again adds a bit of complexity from the cybersecurity posture management point of view. So this is then just trying to illustrate. There are some key figures there as well on how these have changed last year. So for instance, the number of vulnerabilities have raised with almost 600% from previous study and so forth. So huge numbers. The numbers here aren't the importance point, but merely just proof points of what I already said on the previous slides, that it keeps growing. The kind of the surface that we try to protect keeps growing, and every kind of square inch on that surface comes at a cost, and that is why the expenditure is ever increasing. And while doing it, so it's also you're adding complexity with every element you add to the picture, and thus it's not even linear, the kind of added expenditure that you will see as a result of this. And of course, if you're then a CISO or CIO or whatever role that's responsible for protecting your business and running your cybersecurity, then it's a heavy burden that you carry on your shoulders, which we here illustrate with this picture. Nevertheless, then starting to go deeper into so why is it so difficult and complex then? So if you as a CISO or CIO or whatever, put yourself there as you in this picture, and I would argue that in any organization you typically have different teams, be it in-house or out-house, that manage different aspects of your IT infrastructure. And here are just some examples for illustrative purposes. You probably have way more, but typically you would have, for instance, someone running your endpoints, your workstations, your digital workplace environment. Probably have another team managing your server capacity, again, be it in the public cloud or on-premise or private cloud or hybrid IT environment or whatnot. But and in many cases, even those are then separate teams. So quite often you see you have one team managing your own private cloud, one team managing your own on-prem legacy capacity, and one team managing your public cloud capacity, for instance. The same applies for networks. Very often you have a network operations center provider from one direction. You have your own network team, maybe different LAN, WAN, and data center network teams, and the same again for the clouds as well. And the reason I highlight this aspect is that, of course, that introduces a lot of again cross dependencies and a lot of need for collaboration and orchestration to get this whole thing working and running. And the more of these different entities you have, the more complex that job becomes. And of course, then in many situations, you also have a partly or wholly outsourced situation where these teams then are different legal entities, different partners, different suppliers, and you collaborate through basically agreement structures with them, and that makes it even harder than to orchestrate and have them play together, because of course you are basically the one link in the middle that ties them together, and the only kind of leverage to have a telco do something a data center provider needs is basically going through you as the client there, and that again adds burden to you from the orchestration and collaboration point of view. So what I would argue though really is that we need a kind of a shift in this thinking, because from a cybersecurity perspective, the controls that we need to use in order to defend against all these emerging threats and risks and vulnerabilities and whatnots, they are in most cases built into those distinctive capabilities that these distinctive teams are running and maintaining and providing. So take the server then, for instance, as an example. Any server has a bunch of security controls, configuration elements that you can use for your benefit, part of your holistic defense and defense in depth strategy. The same applies for the other areas here, so the workstations, the networks, the clouds, whatnot, and applications, not the least. And what you really need in order to be efficient in your cyber defense is to play these in concert, and that becomes a tough job, and that we need to solve. And thus, what we actually propose here is that we actually need some form of this maybe let's call it SIAM for cybersecurity, or we have branded it ourselves because we talk about security fusion. But in essence, it's about process integration and having someone there in the middle on this picture to orchestrate and integrate from a process point of view. And now we're talking cybersecurity processes, so not meddling with the IT service delivery aspect of it at all, but rather having an alternative dimension to it where we manage the cybersecurity throughout this whole ecosystem of suppliers and internal entities that at the end of the day deliver the cybersecurity. And to do that, of course, it becomes more of a process integration. If it's an outsourced environment, partly or wholly, then it becomes also a lot of kind of a contract management and relationship management question. Of course, you have that internally as well, but it's typically easier to agree with your teammates and neighboring teams than with an external party where you agree in writing in terms of contract. So at least the change management becomes easier typically internally, even though in many cases you might have otherwise quite similar problems there as well. But let's not go into that in more detail. But nevertheless, the proposition is here to build an integrated secure kind of framework of security processes that cut through all these entities on this picture. And this is in a nutshell what we call then the security fusion. And of course, we're a managed cybersecurity services provider, so we're happy to provide many of these services as a fully managed service. But but the key point being here is that we somehow need to fuse all these processes together in order to do on par cybersecurity that is needed in the world of today, regardless of how it's again delivered. So you can just as well do security fusion without having Nixu involved at all, or then we can do more or less everything in the picture. It's also a lot about a kind of a maturity journey, if you like, and that's what I'm gonna try to spend some time on this slide now then to talk about that. So if you think about the evolution of security operations in the first place here in the Nordics, it's maybe security operations centers was the first real operational cybersecurity element that came into play in the market maybe some 10 years back, a decade or two behind, for instance, North America, but nevertheless, that was typically came from the realization that only maintaining protective measures doesn't really cut it, because we need to be able to detect and respond to any malicious activity that's going on there. And that's the kind of first level of maturity that we depicted as here basically consisted of security monitoring, network and endpoint detection and response capabilities, and of course the incident response needs to be there. So not only detecting that something has went wrong, but also being able to act on it. And in many cases, this is also kind of a moment. So when you first kind of get visibility into your environment, it might not be a pleasant surprise what you see, or a pleasant picture that it is painted, if you up to that point had no visibility on what's going on in the environment. So there was also a lot of I would say disappointment in many aspects at this stage as well, and I know that some organizations are still in this, taking the first steps on this maturity journey, and that is why I also talk about it still, and it is a rude awakening. So if you have kind of slept well because you didn't know what's going on within your network, this is a moment of realization, and when you get the capability to actually monitor for security incidents, that okay, there's a lot going on in your environment that you didn't maybe even know of, and that then of course over time drives the question that okay, so we're now monitoring, we're detecting, we're responding to this, and in worst cases we are even rebuilding or recovering from these incidents, which could be very costly and time and painstaking task to take on. So what could we then do better to have less of this? And then of course it becomes kind of quite evident that yeah, we need to, for instance, manage the vulnerabilities to attack surface in a more efficient way, and this is where it also already becomes much more complex. So in order to make sure that you don't have that many security incidents, you need to make sure that your patch management programs, for instance, are working efficiently, and that you have the right priorities. You patch the most critical stuff first, and even before that, you patch the ones that are exposed towards the public internet, for instance, and so forth. But it means that you need to then already on a whole different level understand the kind of risks and how they are intertwined into your network topology or enterprise architecture. So that's a much more tougher job, and the same applies for the other aspects than patching for the security posture operations. So, for instance, continuous hardening of configurations of your security controls, of course, but also your overall IT configuration when it comes to the configuration elements that have an impact on cybersecurity as well. So in many cases, it's not kind of vulnerable software as such creating the problem. It's, for instance, an unsecure configuration of that software that creates the problem. So that's another aspect to it. here again, you of course see in the market that there's a lot of XDRs talks in the cybersecurity market these days. Extended detection and response. In essence, it's all about kind of adding the security posture operations in the loop of detection and responding, and having integrated ecosystems of security controls and tools that are already out of the box integrated with each other, so that because the integration task of maybe again, if you take looking back 10 years, it was more a kind of a best of breed stack that the organizations opted to build. So both an endpoint detection and response CDR solution, for instance, a SIEM solution, and a network detection solution, and then everything was integrated in the SIEM and the SOC and so forth. But that requires a lot of development and efforts and continuous maintenance and so forth, that again drives the cost. So the business case for XDR is of course that all these elements are already pre-integrated, so you get an integrated ecosystem, and that's of course great if you have a monolithic enough environment that actually covers then all of your enterprise IT. In many cases, because of the legacy aspect that we discussed earlier there, that's not what you have. You have a lot of stuff that doesn't fall under that, or you maybe have multi-cloud environment and you cover one of the 3 clouds or something with your fully integrated XDR stack. It also becomes then a question of knowing, better understanding what to protect against, and that is then why we have the threat intelligence piece here. So that has also been a bit of a I would say holy grail for as long as I have worked in the industry at least, and the thinking around threat intelligence has shifted a lot during that time. It started with being really just about kind of a technical artifacts, machine readable indications of compromise or indications of attack and stuff that you could basically feed into your sensor systems in order to know when something fishy is going on. Today, it's much more about truly understanding the motivations and the techniques and tactics used by a certain adversary group or hacking group or cyber criminal organization or whatnot, and which then helps also in defending, because you can kind of think ahead that if it's a group that will be going, they are out to steal your corporate R&D secrets, for instance, then you can kind of work your way back and figure out that what would be the obvious and potential attack paths that they would use in such a case, and then you can kind of build your detection capability, for instance, around that. Of course, protection just as well. But as said, this is already a much more complex scenario than the first one, and thus that's why we state that this kind of running fast pace is the second level of maturity then in where many organizations are today. Then of course the following step, in my opinion, is that to truly understand also, so where are your crown jewels and what are those and how should those then be protected. And my claim on this slide really is that if you think about it from the other way around, that the stuff on level 1 and level 2 are mainly about generic IT infrastructure and or platforms and defending those, and that's of course needed and all fine and well, but in many cases the actual crown jewels, they live in business applications, or if you're in an industrial industry, you will have OT, operational technology systems, on your sites or plants, and or whatever they are called in your given industry, and those are your actual crown jewels. And now if you look at the kind of the defenses that we have in level 1 and level 2, and they are mainly about the generic IT infrastructure stuff, then they are actually quite poor fit for defending those crown jewels. And of course, the thing here again is that doing this is much more difficult because whereas monitoring a firewall is fairly simple because of the reason that in the kind of enterprise IT architectures are first of all they look quite the same in any given organization. So thus we, for instance, as a service provider, we know how to monitor edge firewalls that are fronting your office network, for instance. It's without saying more than that, we pretty much know what we need to look for in the SOC, for instance. But when we go to an OT installation, even though we would know the equipment and how they work and so forth, they are there for a very specific task, and the configurations might be very, very different. And you actually need to understand the context and how the plant works, and in order to be able to distinguish good from bad, or know what the impact of that potential cyber incident would be. And the same actually applies for the business application. So an easy example is that there's a lot of organizations, for instance, using SAP as their ERP, but still they operate in a very different manner. And in order to do monitoring on that level, you actually need to understand the processes and transactions that are happening within that system. Because also when you monitor on this level, it's typically also the adversary is using the valid credentials of some user in your organization. So it's not about breaking into the system; it's already being there and then using the credentials you've stolen earlier there on the lower levels to then misuse those applications and environments that these individuals have rightfully access to. But that said, that's where the actual crown jewels in most cases live, and thus that needs to be brought into it and into the picture, and that's then why we call this the level 3 then. So knowing and protecting and setting up controls around your actual crown jewels to protect them. Then the following level we call then kind of they go low and slow. So this is the moment when you kind of realize that, okay, the noisiest guys, they're out there on the adversary side, typically aren't the most dangerous ones, but the actual pros there are very hard to detect. And then kind of the strategies and techniques that we adopted on the earlier levels here to kind of root out the most of the security incidents, these advanced threat actors, they know how to avoid and evade those controls and techniques as well, and they have plenty of time, plenty of resources, so they're not in a hurry. They don't need to breach you just this week. They can lay still and lay low and see what's happening in the environment for months or years, and then when they see the window of opportunity, then they seize it. And that again then cries out for very different types of strategies to defend against as well. So for instance, proactive threat hunting based on specific hypotheses that, okay, if now you would have an let's say nation state threat actor that was looking out to steal your corporate IP, for instance, then how would they operate? How could we identify that? How could we then detect that? And how would we then go about to mitigate that situation? And it becomes a very different type of game again. And then you end into again, because just detecting and responding isn't enough on this level either. Of course, it's good to have it, but preferably you would of course defend against it in a proactive manner, and that then is calling for more advanced defensive strategies as well, like active defense and the likes, where you set up tripwires and honey nets and stuff, and use elements of kind of misleading the adversary, and in order to be able to detect and then also isolate them when we see them moving in your environment. But then to the points I made earlier around the process integration, I think that is then what really makes cybersecurity then a business enabler. That's when we are actually able to do all of this on this picture in concert across your IT ecosystem, be it in-house or outsourced, be it public cloud or hybrid cloud or private cloud, or very traditional on-premise, be it on your IT infrastructure or your OT or business application environments, and that calls for a lot more tighter process integration than what we typically see these days. And to achieve this, as I stated earlier, the IT industry has been doing service integration and management CM for quite some time in order to holistically manage the delivery of IT services. But the thing is that with cybersecurity is that it's kind of comes in a 90-degree angle in comparison to the actual service delivery. You need to then manage across those service delivery towers or silos. You need to be able to manage the cybersecurity aspects of that, and that's why we think that that is a separate function that is called for in order to get this going. But that, of course, then needs to be tied into the same IT service delivery picture. It can't be done in silo either. It needs to be tightly integrated into that. That requires things like mandate and contractual management and many aspects that are actually not technical at all, but still very hard to solve. And we're not stating by any means that come with us, you can buy this from us out of the box, but more like that this is the strategy that we have adopted. But we think that this is the direction we all need to go, and this is kind of our guiding star, and that we follow and we deliver our services towards and see it as the solution to the problem. And so maybe then nearing the end of the presentation then, so to kind of bring it all together, so my kind of call to action would be that when you are thinking about what your next gen IT strategy should look like, I think you should think about how to build in these aspects that we today talked about here into that, so that it becomes an integral part of the way you run the whole IT show. And with elements of security posture management and have your service providers there, but integrated, force them to talk to each other and work together. That requires that it needs to be factored into the contracts in practice, because kind of easy examples of this is that if your security operations center provider calls your network operations center provider and says that, yeah, I want to make this and that change in your firewall configuration. In many cases, they will say that, no, we won't do that because that would break our SLA or something. So not a very easy task to get that working in concert and integrated. So it actually requires that in this example, then the security operations center needs to be able to operate with the mandate of you, the customer there, and that needs to be factored into the contracts. Of course, those SLA fears are valid and the points are valid, and they need to be resolved as well. So it also means that the contracts, and when it comes to the SLAs, for instance, that the responsibilities and roles are clear in those contracts. But as said, these are rarely kind of technical issues. They are more how we structure and set up the whole operation. Same applies for the vulnerability management aspect and threat intelligence aspects, detective capabilities, and many more. So these are merely examples again, but incident response, I think, is a good example again, that it's kind of the more different isolated environments and parties you have involved in your IT environment, the more complex the incident response and the incident management process becomes as well, not from a technical point of view again, but rather from a commercial and contractual and legal liability point of view, for instance. So there are always difficult discussions when you, for instance, have 3 service providers, one got breached, and that then results in a lot of hassle and painstaking activities for the 2 others as well. And it becomes a discussion about, yes, responsibility, liability, and money. And those are, of course, valid discussions, but not ones you want to have there when you have a wildfire spreading within your environment and have a severe security incident going on. So with that then, so to kind of wrap it up, when we say security fusion here at Nixu, we mean basically the ability to implement all of these capabilities and the other security capabilities that we talked about in one integrated way across all of your internal, external cyber IT infrastructure really, and IT landscape, including also the operational and business applications, in order to to do that in concert and in a holistic manner, manage it as one, even though it's delivered by many. You can read more on this topic. You can find a white paper behind the QR code link there. If you want to discuss this further, please reach out. We're happy to discuss this, and of course, if you have questions now, I'm happy to answer them. I see that so far there's only Sebastian wishing me good morning, but good morning. And, but happy to take other questions, so shoot ahead there in the question panel if you have any. And while waiting for if there will be any questions, then I'll say thank you first of all, and I hope this was of interest and useful, and at least woke some ideas and thoughts, and maybe we can then discuss it further at another point. Okay, I see now there's one question. What is the most critical element for managing your cybersecurity posture holistically across your whole IT ecosystem? Well, I think that maybe actually a very good question, because I maybe missed to even speak about that point. But if you think about to how you actually get this working, I think it's first and foremost, it becomes kind of a strategy question. So there needs to be a real clear mission to have this in place, and there needs to be also a long time commitment to that, because this is not something the fusion that will happen overnight or even within a year. It will take a lot of time and a lot of efforts, and you need to rewrite and recraft a lot of your contracts and your service agreements and your SLAs and your internal OLAs and whatnot, in order to even facilitate for this. And then beyond that, it becomes more of a kind of a cultural thing as well. But that can be sped up also by setting up, for instance, this CM office type of function where you have someone doing it as their day job to just facilitate this kind of governance structure and managing the diffusion over your ecosystem. So I would say that is the one most important aspect. And then there's just thank yous and no more questions. Thank you for listening in, and we'll end the webcast here. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.